With Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3's release, we now officially have 6 trilogies in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I wanted to do something a little different and go back and rank the third installment of the trilogies to see how each one managed to finish off. In last place, we have obviously Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. This one is frustrating for me because from the trailers, this movie looked really good. It was supposed to be the epic film that kicked off Phase 5 and saved us from the mediocrity of Phase 4 films. It was also supposed to be a big, awesome introduction to King the Conqueror, along with also being the closing chapter on the lighthearted and family-centered Ant-Man films. And unfortunately, it barely accomplished any of those. Starting off with the film itself, it wasn't very good. You could tell that the MCU agenda took front and center, as it felt like every plotline was rushed into setting up for future MCU events. The pacing also felt very weird. It lacked what every Ant-Man film had been up to this point, a small-scale superhero movie with great heart and family dynamics. It tried to go big with a giant CGI environment, but lacked depth in the story and didn't feel like actual closure to the Ant-Man trilogy at all. Let's not even talk about MODOK. Kang was good in the film, but I feel like they tried too hard to tell us how big and bad Kang is and didn't really give us time to see or feel it as of yet. Also, he lost to ants. Overall, not a great ending to the Ant-Man trilogy, and even on its own, just a big CGI cash grab with not much soul or anything unique to offer in the MCU. It easily comes in last. In 5th place, I have Iron Man 3. Now, unlike Quantumania, although this is low on the list, I think Iron Man 3 is actually a good movie. This film was the first Christmas movie in the MCU, and it definitely captured the feel. Tony is suffering from PTSD from the Avengers film that released right before this. Apart from that though, there's no other big tie-ins to this movie from the greater MCU. It's a self-contained story about Tony, as he actually has a great arc with him finally letting go of his suits in the end after his home gets destroyed, and he even gets surgery to remove his shrapnel from the first movie. The villain of this film is definitely the weaker point. Aldrich Killian is very forgettable, and the Mandarin twist was very poorly received when this first came out. They did kind of fix it with the one-shot Marvel released right after, and then had the real Mandarin revealed in Shang-Chi, in Wenwu, who actually turned out to be a great villain, so I guess it worked out. Overall though, this film is very enjoyable with Tony as the lead. His relationship with Harley is also really good for his character, and they have a great dynamic portrayed on screen. Not the best movie in the MCU, but a very underrated one with great action and good character development, landing at number 5. In 4th place, and I know I'm going to piss a lot of people off with this one, I'm prepared, I have Captain America: Civil War. Now again, I need to make this clear, I think this is a fantastic movie. It's even in my top 10 MCU films of all time. However, I just think the 3 above this are better. Let's get what I don't like out of the way first, because there honestly isn't much. I feel like this movie had a hard time deciding what it wanted to be. At times it does feel like a sequel to the amazing movie that was The Winter Soldier, but then it shoves it to the side to tell the Civil War storyline that they've been planning for a while. And at other times it can just straight up feel like a mini Avengers film. I think the continuation of Bucky and Steve's story could have worked well in a third Captain America movie with a different plot, and then make Civil War its own film. Especially as Tony Stark feels like more of a main character at times than Steve does. But those critiques aside, this film is fantastic. Baron Zemo is one of the greatest villains ever in the MCU. He has a motive that you can almost root for with a fleshed out backstory. Showing the aftermath and horrible things that the Avengers leave behind after their larger-than-life battles was a really great idea that grounds the MCU into reality and makes the Avengers realize what they can cause. The Avengers also splitting sides over the Sokovian Accords with Tony and Steve felt very natural and made sense in character for each of them along with the rest of the members. Also, the airport battle is one of the coolest things in the entire MCU, and the ending where Tony finds out Bucky murdered his parents was so well done, along with the fight between Tony and Cap. Remember, this movie is also the entire reason the Avengers were split up during Infinity War, so in a way, Zemo actually won. Amazing movie and a great way to end the trilogy, comes in at number 4. In 3rd place, I'm going to put Thor Ragnarok. This movie was the definition of refreshing. After the Dark World and Thor having a very boring personality and a stagnant arc throughout the Dark World and Age of Ultron, something needed to be changed. And man, was Taika Waititi the guy for the job. Right from the beginning of this movie, the colors, the personality, the characters, it was such a nice new take on Thor. There was of course times where I felt Taika took the comedy a little too far that undercut what should have been a much more serious moment, but at least it wasn't as bad as Love and Thunder. Valkyrie is an awesome character introduced, Loki has an amazing arc and truly bonds with Thor for the first time, Hela was a fantastic villain, Thor loses his hammer, Odin has a powerful death, and we have the real Incredible Hulk for the last time in the MCU. Ragnarok managed to tell a great story with Hulk and Thor since they were left out of Civil War that leads perfectly into Infinity War. This movie has great storytelling, vibrant colors, an amazing soundtrack, good humor, awesome action scenes, and great characters with real development. Great way to end an otherwise mediocre Thor trilogy. Deserved the number 3 spot, no doubt. At spot number 2, I'm going to put Spider-Man No Way Home. This normally would have been my number 1, but a recent release dropped this down to number 2 pretty easily. I am sick and tired of all of this sudden No Way Home hate. This movie had some of the biggest hype I think I've ever seen for a movie. Literal endgame levels of hype. When it dropped, it was nothing but praised. People calling it everything they wanted, the greatest MCU movie ever, and no, I'm not exaggerating. If you were there, you remember. Now, all of a sudden, it's just fan service, movie was trash, it's overhyped. Let me dive into this. I do agree with the fact that the setup for the Spider-Man multiverse cracking was poorly written. A 17-year-old Peter Parker convinces Doctor Strange to help brainwash the entire world just because him and his friends can't get into college. Although I can see it kind of making sense given Steven's ego. I'm sure he was thinking he could do it no problem and just wanted to help Peter, but in retrospect, it was pretty stupid. But aside from that, the argument that from a film perspective it's a bad movie is such a stupid argument. The pacing from the very beginning is perfect. There's not a dull moment in the film where it's not keeping the story pushing forward. Peter's character development in this film is one of the best, and I think pushes him into the second best, possibly number 1, but it's tough to beat Tony, developed character in the entire MCU. Peter finally learning his lessons about responsibility through Aunt May was such a nice new take on it, and made her death even more heartbreaking since we saw him and Aunt May's relationship throughout the entire trilogy. The villains were all great and used exactly how they should have been, especially Willem Dafoe. He paired great with Tom Holland's Spider-Man. That entire apartment sequence is one of the most suspenseful and well done action scenes in the entire MCU. Of course, the big deal in this movie was that Tobey and Andrew were brought back, and they were used perfectly. Right after Peter lost his aunt to Green Goblin and was lost, they came in as side characters to help relate to him and pull him out of it. Also, the ending to this film showing the true unselfishness from Peter Parker, ending with the entire world forgetting who he is, including his best friend and girlfriend. And then setting up the perfect street-level Peter Parker story for the next film with him being a broke college student that was truly amazingly well done. I loved it. Deservedly gets hate for some lazy writing, but the rest of this film is pure perfection. This deserves to be at number 2. And in the number 1 spot, I'm putting Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Man, where do I even start? I haven't left the theater feeling this way in a very long time, especially from Marvel. Right from the beginning, James Gunn opens up with Adam Warlock destroying our Guardians, ripping Groot's head off, shooting Rocket with the kill switch, giving big damage to Nebula, and beating Drax to a pulp. What this scene does right from the get-go not only helps show how much these characters all truly care for each other, but how much you as the viewer care for them as they're all on the brink of death right from the start, and sets the emotional string that he now has you on for the rest of the film. That, along with Creep being played while Rocket sulks through nowhere, already had me sold from the very beginning. What I love so much about this movie is that it feels like a very self-contained story. There's no rushing to set up for future movies, there's no converging plot lines with other Phase 4 or 5 films. It's a standalone story about family and the absolute tragic backstory of Rocket Raccoon. Man, was it well done. Seeing Rocket's backstory and why he is the way he is not only recontextualizes his character, but also recontextualizes a lot of his actions throughout the entire trilogy. The High Evolutionary was a fantastic villain that's easy to hate and you love to see lose. Peter and New Gamora's relationship was handled perfectly and was a super unique dynamic for the film. Not to mention the amazing one-shot hallway fight scene. Humor, action, and heart were all top tier, along with what I think was possibly the best way to end this movie and franchise. After a ton of fake-out deaths throughout the movie, they actually all end up surviving and completing perfect character arcs going their own separate ways. This movie was truly one of a kind. Even though recency bias definitely plays a part here, this is still one of the best movies in the entire MCU, and easily the best third movie of all the trilogies. What did you guys think of my list? How would you rank all the third movies in the MCU? Let me know down below in the comments, and let me know what other unique rankings you guys would like to see on the channel. You guys seem to enjoy my in retrospect video on Thor Love and Thunder, so I think I'll be following it up with another one on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. So be on the lookout for that. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Peace.